Twitter are very altruistic. Granted, not Donald Trump, but many of the people on Twitter are very altruistic. They want to help. So if someone in Australia that I'm working with, I know on Twitter, is writing a blog post, they might ask me to edit it. They might ask me to write a paper with them. Those papers then lead to a promotion. These things start to add up just because you're interacting with people on social media. If you just want to sit on social media and watch, that's great, but it's not going to benefit your career unless you get out and start meeting people. Teaching like this is fantastic. Don't change the way you teach. If you're teaching, what you're doing is working, then don't change it. But social media allows you to do things a little bit differently. There's a thing that I like to call the global classroom. When I teach here or anywhere else, people are tweeting, people are putting things on Instagram. People are watching this all over the world. People watch speakers from all over the world from other countries because they don't have the infrastructure to have their own education. So when people are tweeting, anybody tweeting right now at all? Anybody? No one's tweeting? Anybody on Instagram? You're not, you're on Instagram. Somebody's on it. You're on Instagram? I see some smiles. So at conferences, a lot of people get on Twitter and they start adding the things the speakers are talking about, and then people from all over the world start watching that conference. So effectively, you are teaching in a much bigger space than this auditorium. You're teaching people all over the world. Your impact is greater. Can you really teach with Twitter? The question is, do you want to teach with Twitter? Most people, when I say this, say, listen, I'm busy, I have my own job. Why would I want to teach on Twitter? Well, there's a number of reasons. One, you help the world. Two, you start to meet people who care about what you're doing. Three, meeting those people will lead to acceleration of your own career. So yeah, it does matter. Let me show you how not to teach on Twitter. I'll let you look at this for a second. Let me know what you think. What's the diagnosis? ST elevation myocardial infarction, heart attack. Yeah, it's bad, right? Look at the name. Funny thing is, when I posted this on Twitter, people said that's a privacy violation. I said, it's my EKG. Anyway, that was funny. So no, it's not a privacy violation. I posted this on Twitter 2.5 years ago, 6 hours after my heart cath. This is me. This happened to me. I thought it was just reflux. Turns out it was not just reflux. I had, and I'll show you in a second, I think I have it here. If you can see here's my right coronary artery occluded right there. That's not normal, just in case you're wondering. Many of you are wondering, why in the world did you put that on Twitter? I don't know. I don't. I thought it was an opportunity to teach. At the time that this happened to me, I was 50 pounds heavier, unhealthy. I was headed in the wrong direction, and I thought, when I saw this, I have to share this, because there's so many people around the world that this is going to happen to. I've talked to so many physicians, could be nurses too, but I've talked to so many physicians that this has affected. Now, I could have decided, by the way, I don't recommend you teach like this. Don't go have a heart attack to teach. But I talked to so many people that made me realize, I could have just kept my EKG. I could have not shared it. I could have not shared the story of how I got well and healthy, and how I went from no exercise for years to 6 to 7 days in the gym for an hour a day just to stay healthy. I could have done that, but I chose to change the world. So you may have your own story. Maybe it's not a heart attack, but maybe it's something else. Maybe it's something that could change the world. Share it. Social media allows you to do things outside of your job that you will never have in your job. The ability to truly change the world. and get involved. I just want you to think about it. I'm not saying go out and do it today. Don't go have a heart attack today to do this, by the way. And of course, I put it on Twitter, Facebook. I wasn't on Instagram then, but I put it everywhere. And then I shared my cath video. Some of you are looking at me like, this guy's pretty stupid. Why would he do that? Change the world. Medical educators, and I look at you right now, I think some of you think you change the world, and you do. But you can change all of it. You can change other people in other countries just by getting involved in social media. Wouldn't that be a nice thing to think about someday when you retire, that you helped so many more people around the world? You can do it quite easily. You don't have. You can be creative. You don't have to send out your heart cath or your EKGs. You can make things like this. This is just a picture I made to send out on Twitter, that the people you teach will someday be taking care of you. And it's true, but this is just one means of teaching on Twitter and social media. Yeah, you can post, soccer scores and stuff like Donald Trump does, but I don't know that those things actually change the world. You can be creative and make whatever you like. These are podcasting tips. When I forget to teach during a shift, I'll text the teaching pearl to the residents after the I forgot to tell them that. Be creative. Share this with people around the world who will think it's a good idea, and they'll adopt what you're talking about. So social media allows you to break outside of the job that you have right now. All right, we'll skip through this. Here's just an example of ways that you can teach on Instagram. I'm not trying to talk you into teaching on Instagram. If I could do nothing more than just convince you to start trying to understand your learner space, then I'll be successful. But you can teach on Instagram. This is a friend of mine who puts ultrasound videos and lots of other good educational things up there, and then her residents follow this account. It's a great way to teach. And the key thing is, this is where the learners spend their time anyway. So if learners like to spend their time here, why not try to teach more in that space? Makes your job easier. It just works. And of course, you can teach on Twitter. You can post books and pearls and so forth and so on. And you're helping people around the world. This is a picture. This is the epiglottis. A nurse came up to me during a shift when I was working in Maryland a few years ago and said, I think there's something stuck in my throat. And we looked in with a video, and sure enough, there was a fishbone right there. So what we did was what's called patient-assisted laryngoscopy. So we sprayed this was a nurse, so they were very compliant, sprayed their throat. The nurse actually held the laryngoscope for us while we removed it with video. I totally stole this procedure from a resident. I didn't even tell them I was doing it. So fun. So that was the teaching pearl, that if someone has a fishbone or a bone stuck in their throat, you can have the patient do the work while you get it. That was it. And I put it on Twitter, and that same night, 3 people in 3 other different countries had used the same technique to get a fishbone out of someone's throat. So I could have kept that to myself. And some of you, I know the looks, we won't have time to talk about peer review, because the big criticism is, well, this is not peer reviewed. The blogs, the podcast, this stuff, it's not peer reviewed. People will follow this advice and could cause harm. We can talk about that later, but I think for the most part, this stuff that people put out on social media is really safe, and it helps patients around the world. Learning with social media, whether you're an educator, learner, or anyone else, it just works. You can learn so much more by getting involved in social media and breaking outside your current position. People ask, why are you on Twitter? Why are you on Instagram? Because there's this great conversation always going on, and the only way you know what's going on is to listen. The only way to listen is to get on and listen. You can choose not to listen as an educator, but guess who's listening? The learners. The people you're supposed to be teaching how to take care of patients, they're listening. Are you? Think about that. This is how you listen to the conversation that your learners listen to. Has anybody ever had a resident or student come up to them and want to do something that they learned on social media? Anyone? That happens in emergency medicine all the time. And I've had residents come up to me and say, hey, I'd like to do this. And I hadn't even heard of it because they learned it on social media. So the most important benefit as for this stuff as an educator is this keeps you fresh. If you know what they're learning and where they get it from, you're constantly updated on what they're hearing so that you can correct them or say, no, that's not a great idea, or sure, let's do it. If you're not listening, you're not teaching. If you're not listening, you're not teaching. So my challenge to you is to think about when you leave here and when you go to your job and when you go home to dinner and go to sleep, and that cycle continues, someday you're going to look back and think, was I a good educator? Did I do a good job? I think that if you use even just a couple of the things we've talked about, all of these ultimately, the social media, the teaching less is more, motivating people, giving people feedback that helps, all of those things is what closes the gap between educators and learners. Ultimately, my belief is that if you close the gap, patients will get better care. If the gap keeps getting bigger, things are going to get worse. So your job as an educator, as a learner as well, is to find ways to close that gap. But for the educators in the room, if you've been reluctant to get on social media, if you've been reluctant to have your children, or dare I say grandchildren, or residents, or anyone, teach you how to use these platforms, have them sit down and show you how to do it. Have them sit down and show you how to install Instagram. Practice some of these teaching techniques, which have been proven time and time again to activate learners' minds, and you'll make a greater difference in the lives of students. I firmly believe this. As you leave this talk, I just want you to remember that regardless of video cameras, poster sessions, badges, the hotel rooms that some of you may have to get, how tired you are right now, all of this, all of it, every conference is about taking care of patients. Everything you do every single day for learners is an attempt to make sure patients get better care. And someday, that patient will be you. So do a good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers, for this very inspiring talk. You have clearly pointed out to the many aspects that can be used in this digital age, where we can make use of social media and other internet sources. But here again, we have the problem of students, are they really accessing reliable sources? The reliability of the sources should be checked very well by the teachers and by the students themselves.
Yeah, the question is, are we sure students are reaching reliable sources? And that's why I think that educators need to be on social media and know what blogs they read and know what podcasts they listen to, so that we have some type of filter to know what they listen to or what they're learning. If you back away and don't watch what they're doing, you have no indication as to what they're learning. I've heard some educators say, all of this stuff is just crazy. Social media is crazy, the podcasts, the blogs, just have them go read the book, and let's just go back to what we used to do. Well, guess what? It's not gonna happen. It doesn't happen. So the reality is, for especially the older people who need to just get their head around this, the learners have moved on. And if we don't catch up, patient care is going to suffer. We have to move on and catch up to our learners.
Thank you. Any questions? Any contribution, sorusu, katkısı olan var mı acaba? Thank you. I think one of the important take-home messages I can summarize is the less you teach, the more the students will remember, is one of the take-home messages.
Yes.
And speaking too much doesn't mean you teach a lot. And instead of teaching, we should inspire our students. This is one of another take-home message. And we should believe that the students are learning at their own pace, and even if we don't provide them some social media or internet sources, they are forming their own social media. They are forming their own groups among themselves. This is what we observe with the students anywhere in the world.
Right.
Başka soru, katkı? Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Rogers.
Thank you.
Şimdi yarım saatlik bir çay kahve molamız olacak ama onun hemen öncesinde dışarıda bir fotoğraf çekimi olacak. Katılmasını rica ediyorum.